Welcome to Marketing Rebels Breaking Business Barriers. You've joined us for a special series called Marketing Momentum for Mental Health. We have Meggan here today, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, why this topic matters to her, and why it should matter to you. Meggan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Hi,
I'm
I'm Meggan Van Harten. I'm co-CEO from Design to Plume. Design to Plume, we focus on creating inclusive and accessible communication solutions that resonate. And some of my clients include RBC, John Hopkins, Native Americans in Philanthropy. We're indigenously owned, women run. So love working on diverse projects and really promoting accessibility and inclusivity as much as possible. And I'm excited to talk about mental health today with Shauna because mental health is such an important component of accessibility as well, and such an important component of being a good business leader and creating safe work environments and healthy work environments as well. So happy to be here, Shauna.
This is actually an amazing kind of start to what we're diving into here, because you touched on you touched on a lot of really pivotal areas where we see mental health support rather lacking. And I'm curious to know what your experience is in the role of an entrepreneur, supporting and working with women, Indigenous women, and whether or not mental health has been good enough, for lack of a better word. I have a few choice words I'd like to use because I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear about your experience in that space.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like being an accessibility professional and really doing our best to promote accessibility from a human perspective. So not from like a compliance standpoint where we're focusing on like completing like check boxes and how do we make this inclusive by, some sort of like standards. We're really focused on how do we make this good for people and how do we make it really resonate with people and how do I make it so that we're breaking down these barriers so that everyone can access these materials, so that everybody has access to like some of the industries that I work with are health industries, higher education, all of these things that are important to all of us. And we have to be able to break down these systems. Now, like mental health in these systems for sure, like plays a big component. Like when it comes to accessibility, we can often prioritize like experiences that are more of the seen disabilities, I'll say, rather than like the invisible disabilities or like something like anxiety, depression, other sorts of mental health issues that might come into play when we're talking about our marketing. Like, how do we make these things really good for somebody who might have an anxiety disorder? Things like that need to be really embedded in the way that we approach that. And it comes down to like our company being indigenously owned. Like we lead with that lens to our company. And our lenses for Design to Plume are indigeneity, inclusivity, diversity, equity, accessibility, and sustainability. And the way that we use these lenses, it applies throughout all of our projects. And we almost like look at it as like a tapestry, like these weaving threads of like everything that we do. So, if a project comes to us and it's not with an accessibility lens, we're going to apply it anyways. Like you can't really take that away from us. It's always going to be embedded as part of our process. But where it really disrupts marketing, that's why, like marketing rebels, I love disruption and doing all of those sorts of things. It really changes the game when you focus on that mental health component. So for instance, like anxiety inducing marketing is a really common tactic in marketing. And what happens, like how rebellious is it to say we're going to do the opposite of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to make a sale without having to resort to anxiety inducing tactics. There are literally websites out there that are built all around this idea of like creating a false system of scarcity.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned that we run our company with this lens of like accessibility at every piece. So, part of the way that we run our business has to be accessible for my staff. But then in the same turn, like all of the products that I want to work on and the people I want to work with need to also match that same vision. So these same clients need to match that vision. And like when it comes to anxiety inducing marketing tactics, like embedding, false terms in there, like, so for instance, like certain websites will have on them, oh, 38 people have this in their cart, or 38 people are ready to check out with this, and you're not going to get that ticket if you don't buy it right now. And when you actually look at the code of the website, you're like, actually, none of this is true. This is just a random generated number. And the idea is to create this like false sense of scarcity behind this marketing tactic. And like my company, I'm like really against these sorts of things. Like, be honest, be transparent, be inclusive, like do all these things that are in opposition to that kind of marketing, because those tactics do work, but it's preying on people and setting them up to become victims when they might not even realize it, or playing to these things that are harming us. And I'm just fully against that. So
I'm here for this, because I can't tell you how many times that little, and I like to claim that I'm pretty good with FOMO. Like, I'm okay. Don't worry about it. I'll miss the party. But when that thing pops up and I'm looking at the spatula I always wanted, and it says you might not be able to get this if you don't order it now, then I go, oh wait, hold on. And you really have to check yourself before you wreck yourself, don't you? And that's not fair, right? And I think another aspect of that we could maybe explore, especially with the marketing space, is the behind the scenes part of that. As an entrepreneur, as a person, you and I being people who help business owners and entrepreneurs, you're told all the time to do this. And it typically, for the majority of us, and this is coming from hundreds of conversations that I've had, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to execute this type of marketing, and it doesn't feel good to receive it. And so what does that do when you feel like you have to do something that you don't want to do in your heart of hearts? How does that impact your mental health? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think in a case like that, when we started our company, I thought that that was the typical way of doing business, is really twisting and shaping yourself around your clients or what projects might come your way. And what we recognized really early in establishing our business is that we could either play the game and pretend we're like everybody else and do that shaping, twisting piece, or we could
I
be
usually
really,
call it contorting. You're contorting yourself literally to try to
yeah,
fit into this
exactly.
silly little box that doesn't even matter, because the box is
Mhm.
arbitrary. It doesn't even
It
need to be
is.
there.
Yeah, and it's unclear expectations because it's
Yes.
not your expectations. And so we had to ask ourselves really early, like, is that who we want to be? Is this how we want to do things? And what we realized is that the answer was no. We really don't want to be doing these things in that way. And we want to be ourselves, and we want to be proud of the work that we're doing, and we want to align to our personal vision of success, and for that authenticity to show. And that's why we were like, nope, we're indigenously owned, we're women led. We love working on inclusive and diverse projects that create more equity in the world, equitable world, and really with this like authentic focus on accessibility. Like, I'm neurodivergent, I have ADHD, and it's really important for me to also experience the world in a good way. And I want to put out more materials out there that create more safety and um, create just a better marketing environment, right? I don't want to prey on people's weaknesses. I want to build up the people around me. And I think that's what's so unique about our approach at Design to Plume.
Absolutely. And I want to know, because you described very briefly the transition from um, feeling like you needed to contort yourself to the status quo, and then emerging on the other side with this,
Mm-hmm.
what I like to call comfortable confidence in who you are and what you believe in, and that attachment to your core values at its roots, and the ability to action that. Now, those are we see these stories all the time about the before and after. But what I find is sometimes missing in that is the in between. because there's often a lot of tumultuous internal and external experiences that happen in that space. And that's where we're finding a lot of in the entrepreneurial space, in the marketing space, we get that mental health suffering because we don't know. We're being pulled everywhere. You're stressed out, you're overwhelmed, you're feeling hopeless. That sense of
Mhm.
hopelessness can become so overwhelming, especially if there are any pre-existing mental health concerns. But even if there aren't, are you willing to share some of those experiences of being pulled in both directions and kind of how it felt during that time and some of the strategies you used to push yourself through to the other side?
Yeah, I think the only reason why I have this confidence is because I did try doing that and I did stretch myself. I imagine that, like the toy from the 90s, like where he could stretch his arms
Armstrong.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, forever and forever and forever. And I felt like that I was like, yeah, this is just business. And hopefully I don't snap. And eventually you just get to a point where you're like, wait, but is that what I want to do? Do I want to stretch forever? And is this good for me? And uh, I think it's also like a method of like being a female entrepreneur. I hear so much from other female business owners that it's like we stretch ourselves and we try our best to like be everything to everyone, including like the people that work for us, the clients that we're trying to reach, our families, and somehow we have to all hold everything together. And then really what happens at the end of the day is that you get closer and closer to that burnout line, and I've been there. Like I went down that path of trying to twist myself, contort myself into all these different shapes and be like, okay, Megan, all you have to do is like change who you are to be like the better fit for this
Isn't that
situation.
isn't that sick? Even just that statement, all you have
Mhm.
to do, as though it's nothing.
Yes. Yeah. And then what I realized is that people actually, who I am is part of my business, and who my business partner is, like that again, that's all part of my business. And being authentic to who that is, I want to work with people who want to embrace those values, not break them or look for a checkbox of being like, okay, like we got our one woman on the panel. Here we go. We can have the panel now. Um,
Oh, man.
decided I didn't want to be a part of those things, and I wanted to really embrace building a different culture. And so, like helping other women like climb the ladder and like be successful, and how we can be collaborative in these situations. Like so much of business is about who you know, and like who you're connected with, but that also means that there's a strength in partnerships, right? Like being able to lead with your strengths always. Like I always tell my staff this, I'm like, what are your strengths? Use that. Like, you don't have to be everything to everyone, you don't have to be everything here at the Plume. It's not what the expectation of you is, but you can tell me these are my strengths. This is what I can contribute, and like here's some things that I need in order to do my best. Like that's the stuff I want to hear.
Absolutely. And so would you say then, like in the context of a woman-owned business who is trying to really make it, right? This is a person who's like typically transitioning out of maybe a 9 to 5 or trying to really grow a business that's been plateaued for a long time. They're like, I need to take it to the next level. But I'm constantly feeling as though I'm wearing all the hats. I'm burning out on a regular basis. It's cyclical at this point and it's
Hmm.
expected. And so we just kind of lean into it, wondering how far we're going to stretch before we snap, right?
Hmm.
For that person, would you say that one of their biggest assets will be their community?
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking like as you were describing this person, because I was that person at one point, and I'm like, I can just do everything and I'll just somehow put it all on my back. You only have 100. You always only have 100. And stop DIYing everything in your business. Like
Yeah.
how many times is like delegation is a strength, and it can be a really good skill. And if you lack that skill, you need to embrace it and learn it so that you can grow the community around you, grow the people around you. Because if you have a good business idea and you're leading in a really good, fresh way, people will be drawn to that. The right people will be drawn to that, and they'll embrace it too. They'll want to help and they'll want to make it succeed. So like feeling like, oh, I have to like, collect everything from everybody and I have to protect them from these things. That was something that I always struggled with, was like the idea of like, oh my God, that grenade is going to hit that person and I can't let that happen. And then what I realized is like these grenades I was perceiving as like, going to be potentially catastrophic to somebody, they really didn't hit them in the same way it hit me. Like I was super stretched. They weren't stretched, and it was within their skills and their wheelhouse and their strengths. So really that thing that was a grenade to me wasn't a grenade to them at all. And they were like, oh, well, I can just diffuse this very quickly and easily by letting them handle it, right? Like
Yeah.
everything that we do as entrepreneurs is meant to be something impactful back to the business. And it's like our people are our business, so it's like you do a lot overall to make sure that that experience is really good for everybody, but at the same time you have to kind of like organically let it happen and let those people come to you and say when it's too much or too little, or and be open to those ideas too. And for those people that are transitioning into entrepreneurship, who are doing the 9 to 5 and doing the grind and they want something different, yeah, I think like one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is trying to do everything on your own. Something that we learned from EDC, Economic Development Bank of Canada, I think is like what it stands for. Anyways, I learned this at a women's conference and it kind of shocked me because it said that only 14% of women businesses even take out a loan. And that blew my mind because I thought bootstrapping in your business was doing something different. But I realized that it's risk, right? As women, we don't take risks in business as much as male business owners could, right? So they'll borrow money and grow their business much faster. And I know we're moving away from mental health, but in the same way,
No.
like,
Well, in a lot of ways, we're not, though.
right.
Because that sense of safety is a really important aspect of mental health, and especially for women, especially for, the communities who have routinely been swept under the rug. That idea of safety is a really, really prominent one, and can absolutely, when it's shaken, when your sense of safety is shaken, it can lead you to like increased anxiety, depression, all sorts of things that stem from overwhelm and overstimulation. And I can even just putting myself empathetically into that position where one's safety is shaken, I can feel my capacity as a business owner diminishing because I cannot put all of my proverbial spoons are being put into managing that shaken safety rather than making executive choices for my business that will help me to succeed.
And how far can you really go when you have to bootstrap everything yourself? When you have to DIY it, when you have to bootstrap it yourself, you have to put your own finances on the line. All of that can contribute to an anxiety-inducing situation for sure. There's like two folds to that too, because there's the other component of like, historically, the reason why people haven't asked for loans is because they weren't given to them like in the first place.
That's
So,
right. I mean, I'm grateful that my husband doesn't need to sign for a loan for me, because I tell you, that
yes.
man took us 5 years to buy this darn house. I would have been flipping houses in that time because I'm ready. Yeah, let's do the thing. And he's like, it doesn't feel right.
Yes.
So, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a really important transition, but I think that's actually a good note, though, is just like culturally, systemically, women were not allowed to get a loan. And marginalized communities were either not allowed to, or it was made extremely difficult, and still can be made extremely difficult to this day with systemic racism as it stands. And so all of those things impact the mental health of potentially amazingly impactful business owners.
Yeah, and, like, when they look at a comparison, maybe somebody else in their family owned a business, and looking at how they did their business, maybe they had to bootstrap it.
Mhm.
Maybe they were only in a position where they could not get financing or funding or, have some of these, like, um, I'm gonna say, like, just business acceleration programs,
Yep, sure. Yep.
you know, because money accelerates things. So, in that case, it's like when you look at it in the rear view and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like that's what, my auntie had to do or like my family or my grandma, like what they had to do." But, I'm hoping that things have changed now where women can get these loans and um yeah, I think it was just a wake up call to me that it's like where I thought I was being different and bootstrapping and, using um the speed of cash in order to accelerate things that was good, but then I realized I'm just another part of the system where women haven't been given the same opportunities, and that also is like a draining on your mental health as well, that you don't have these like systems to build you up. And things are shifting, like everything is hopefully shifting in a good direction, in some cases slower than others, but uh,
Sure.
hopefully a shift in a good direction to allow these businesses to thrive and to let these entrepreneurs be successful, because I think if you're gonna be a business owner, you have to kind of know what the game is. And even if you choose to, like, I've chosen to play a different game than everybody else, but it took me realizing what that game was and then looking at it from a differentiator perspective and going into it from a completely new lens.
Actually, I love your word of lens. You hear a lot of people say your business values or your oh goodness, there are all sorts of words that people use for it, and you're using the word lens a lot, and I really appreciate that, because it encourages us to consider things from alternative perspectives just by using that word, just that language alone. And so somebody who is, regardless of their space, like how advanced or not advanced they are in their business, and regardless of what sort of experiences they have on the other side of business, that is your life, your experiences, your history, your potential traumas, or maybe none.
Hmm.
I don't think I know anyone without any, but here we are, right? I think that idea of lens. What is the lens that you're looking from, and what other perspectives and lenses could you look at these situations from in order to help you navigate the difficulties, the very real difficulties that arise when you're trying to better yourself in life and business.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why for like us, we have our lenses and that they're all interconnected, right? To like build this tapestry, this vision. Because like these lenses oh, we won't just do like a sustainability project. It has to feel like it's going to be indigenous. It's going to be through that perspective of indigenous ownership, like every time. And same with like accessibility, like what we talked about that in terms of like mental health today. But like when I think about accessibility and people aren't considering it as part of their lenses for their companies or part of their lenses for their marketing, my question back to them is always, who are you willing to exclude then?
Hmm.
Because if you're not thinking about accessibility, if you're not thinking about inclusivity, then you have to be ready to tell me, yeah, I'm willing to exclude these people. Because that's what it's all about, right? Like accessibility is all about breaking barriers and making things approachable for everyone. And we can't say we're doing that without including these lenses of accessibility and inclusivity and the diversity behind it too, right? Like including those voices from the start. Don't just ask them at the end of the project, like, is this cool? Do you like this? Like, no, they should be part of like identifying what the problem is with you, right? It shouldn't just be like this like checkbox at the end. Yeah, we consulted some focus group once and now we roll out a product,
Right.
right?
Right. No, I love that. I want everybody to kind of consider that actually, as you kind of navigate the world today, is if you have not considered inclusivity, who are you willing to exclude?
Mhm.
I think that's very powerful. Um, uh, I'm actually just sitting in that. I really feel like that's a really respectful way to remind everyone that you're never not marketing, which is
Mhm.
my kind of MO, just to remind yourself, hey, just because the cameras aren't rolling doesn't mean that you're not being perceived. It doesn't mean that you're not having an impact on those around you. And that impact could be pretty massive. Now, I wanted to talk about just very briefly, because I believe you will be one of the most important people in this series to talk to me about this is
That's so kind.
but I think so, just because I can't speak to this. Indigenous owned, inclusive business owner in the space for a long time now. He's 12 years, I think you said.
15 in May, actually.
Put me in my place. Uh,
Yeah,
oh, there you go.
15.
15.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so in this is just proof that you are the person. So when we're considering mental health on both sides of the marketing coin, you're showing up for your business, and I believe you're never not marketing. So in life and business, because your life is going to bleed into how you market your business,
Mhm.
right? If you are a marginalized person, if you are somebody who has been systemically marginalized, how is that going to impact? And does that, not does that, how does that impact the way you're showing up, the way you can market your business, and how you can grow your. I know this is a very multidimensional question, but I'd really like to dive into that so that we can give some perspective, as we just described, give some perspective into privileged others like myself when considering that question. Who am I willing to exclude? Because I'm personally not. I'm not. I'm not willing to exclude. Can let me see if I can make this question clearer. Can you shed some light into that experience, the experience of the marginalized communities looking to show up and market themselves with the weight of history on their shoulders?
Mhm.
I hope that was phrased in a way that was
Yeah,
more
just a
articulate than the
small
first one.
question.
I know it's huge. This is why I'm sitting here. I'm actually literally like getting warm. If any, like, oh my goodness, look at the cheeks. They're red, because it actually upsets me to think about this, but it's important to me to think about this,
Mhm.
and to think about how I'm approaching this in my personal and professional development, and how I can continuously strive for better.
Yeah. And from a marketing standpoint, we need that diversity, right? Like we need diverse voices out there, building businesses, challenging systems, dismantling the systems that are already chugging away.
I love that
And
word,
for us,
dismantle. Let's
oh yeah,
do
yeah.
it.
I mean, we got to be ready to break stuff. Like this is 2024. We're
Yes.
gonna break stuff.
Love it.
you know,
Perfect.
and like just speaking as a woman business owner too, right? Like some of those experiences. Like I've definitely been a, boardroom settings where I sit down as a consultant. This is like way early in my career, but sitting down as a consultant, and then somebody who's the decision maker is late to the table, and they sit down, and then they're like, "Oh, could you get me a coffee?" And I'm
Mm.
like, "I'm your consultant today. Thank you." So, like I know that women will also experience this challenge. People who with disabilities will experience this challenge. Like there's so many vast spectrums of diversity of people, and we all need to build each other up, shout each other out on the good work that we're doing, and to pursue it in these different lenses. So like something that my company, like what we look at a lot of is indigenous accessibility, and how that's different than the standards or like some of the compliance factors that are out there. And what I mean by that is For instance, like because we've had forced erasure across Canada where we've lost languages for Indigenous communities. What's happened is that um, with these new like accessibility standards, oftentimes there's a focus on this monolingual setup. So this idea of like you have something in English and maybe in French, or you might have it in fully in Cree or something like that. But with forced erasure, the concept of forced erasure, how can you really introduce representation when a language has been dismantled and destroyed too, right? And so with accessibility in mind, we've created different systems where we include oral history teachings in that Indigenous language because we know assistive technology doesn't come in that language, but we can have an elder speak in that language um, on our website or in the materials, something to that effect, so that everybody gets a glimpse into that language and that people can start to reconnect with it as well, like people from the community. Because this idea of like, we need to silo everything, that's not true. That's not actually good for anybody's learning. Everything should be woven, it should be weaving together, and everything should influence one another. So it's actually a better, more accessible experience for somebody from an Indigenous community where maybe partial language has been lost, where they can see, oh, this is the English version, this is it, you know, my language represented over here. So we need that diversity in business. We need Indigenous people to be in business. We need them to be in marketing, because nobody would have looked at that and said like, huh, something's missing here. You know, they literally developed these standards and these protocols for accessibility without Indigenous people in mind. And now we're having to face the consequences of that, which is that technology isn't meant for Indigenous people, doesn't have, even assistive technology doesn't have their languages represented. And it's hugely disappointing and damaging, continuously like perpetuating that cycle of forced erasure of language. And we have to be ready to like bring in all these diverse voices, because those are the people that are going to understand the problem and are going to have creative ways of solving it. Like for me, my company, we have to be really creative and work around the system, because I'm not big enough to totally take it apart. But you know, like when we're talking about juggernauts like Adobe, Google, like all these big
Mhm.
systems, like you could do something here. Let's do something awesome and, you know, tackle the problem from the source instead of trying to develop technology um, in the same colonial mindset that it's always had. And from that Western perspective of like, we'll just keep iterating on the same thing we've always had. Well, maybe you need to go back to the beginning and start over.
That's that's actually beautiful. It's just like one of those things where your storytelling techniques in this capacity really just shed light on everything that I asked in a way that makes me want to ask more. However, we are running short on time, so I want to mention one last thing before inviting you to share your final thoughts. And the one last thing that I want to kind of bring up is the integrative methodologies that you just presented with regards to creating representation for the Indigenous communities and beyond, because there are many communities who have experienced this because of the colonizations and everything, which we're not going to get into super deeply on this call, but maybe on another call. So this integrative approach, I just want everyone to know that we've actually gone full circle. That's the perspective, the lens that we can look at our mental health and business growth and life experiences through. They aren't housed in these little cages on the top of pillars that you need to climb every time you access them. They are together. They are a part and parcel of everything. So if you're experiencing overwhelm, burnout, if you're experiencing the side effects of your own personal mental health journey and it's impacting your business, we need to go back to the roots, as Meggan said, and really think about an integrative approach to how we're running our business and living life that will allow us to flow in a way that keeps us sustainable, because I know sustainability is a huge deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, keeping in mind sustainability is multifold as well, because we can look at eco-sustainability and and our internal living sustainability, but they hold hands too. It's all integrated.
Absolutely.
So that notion put out into the world, we're going to let that fly into the universe. What are some final thoughts that you want to share, Meggan, with regards to the amazing wealth of knowledge that we just dove into today?
I think my final thought is really coming back to that idea of who are you willing to exclude? So, if we're willing to exclude anyone, does that match your core values? Is that matching what you want to accomplish? Is that the legacy you want your name, your soul attached to? And to ask yourself those deep questions of what are my lenses? Now, to me, it's indigeneity, inclusivity, diversity, equity, accessibility, and sustainability. But your lenses could be different for you. And they should be unique for you. Those core beliefs are fundamental to the way that you can live your life and alignment with your business, and have a great outcome as well. And specifically as well, like, as a takeaway from this moment, I always love to give something practical, actionable for accessibility. Start small, start soon, start somewhere. Continuous improvement always. Like, the idea is just get started with making your materials more accessible, include alternative text, check your contrast levels. And like we talked about, avoid these marketing anxiety inducing tactics, because they do exist. They work. I won't lie to you, they work. But do you want that to be like, is that good enough? Like, to make the sale, is that the goal? Is that what the world that we want to contribute to? That we want to build a world based on exclusion? We got to be out there solving the right problems and building the right systems for everybody to be brought into the table, so that all these diverse voices can be heard.
Beautiful. Solve the right problems, create
Yeah.
the right systems. I'm gonna just soak it in, and I encourage the rest of you to as well. Now, keep in mind, though, you can only soak it in for a little while, because we are having these conversations every single day this week. So join us in. We're going to be diving into all sorts of perspectives and lenses when it comes to entrepreneurship, mental health, and marketing momentum. We want to make sure that we're creating sustainable systems. We want to make sure that you're showing up as your best self, both when we're on screen, on camera, so to speak, even if it's not literally, but also behind the scenes. We're leaning into our best life on your terms. With that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next part of this series of Marketing Momentum for Mental Health.